So, I am typically a pastel artist, but one of my goals for 2025 was to practice painting. So, I decided to get on with it and I bought myself a small set of very pretty acrylic gouache paints. I know very little about different kinds of paint, so I'd love if some more knowledgeable artists could let me know any tips for using this kind of paint, as in this video I will literally just be making it up as I go along. First of all, please excuse the mess of my desk and my palette especially. I've been playing around with some old acrylic paint and completely destroyed my paint palette in the process. I would also love if you could let me know in the comments how to clean the paint off because I have been struggling. Here is me testing out these new paints a bit. I was trying to figure out how they layer, how to use them, how much water to use with them. But from when I've used gouache in the past, I know it's sort of like a watercolor, but more possible to apply opaquely. But when I noticed these, they didn't react with the water in the way I was expecting. I'm not sure if that's because they're acrylic gouache, and maybe you aren't supposed to water them down, but I watered down my paints no matter what because I really hate the feeling of a dry brush on paper. It just really makes me cringe. So I sort of worked out here that I have to use as little water as I can to keep the saturation and for it to dry in a way that lets me layer the pastels over the top. Today I'm going to be drawing a blue tiger. Tigers was one of my requests for my Instagram comments, but to be honest I draw them all the time anyway and it's just one of my favourite animals to draw, so hopefully you aren't bored of them already. I'm sort of building on my cat and plants concept with a similar colour palette and composition in mind to see if I can kind of push that idea further. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I feel guilty sometimes about repeating colour palettes in my art, as if I have to come up with a whole new one every time I draw. But I have to remind myself that that is just really silly because that's literally the way that artists discover their favourite colours and how they work together and different contexts to use them in, so this drawing will be exactly that. When I started to paint over my sketch, I did immediately realise that I used a pink pencil to draw it with, so the red covered it up pretty much completely. So what I ended up having to do was watch back this video to draw it again over the underpainting. Also, I should say that this drawing is just the practice sketchbook drawing and that my intention is to make it again but more confidently on a canvas to add the originals onto my shop. So you'll be seeing that in this video too. Once the reddy orange underpainting was dry, I went in with my wax pastels. I used the KraftGeek Neocolor II pastels for anyone who's wondering, and something special about them is how well they layer over other mediums and even themselves. I do get a lot of people asking me in the comments and at markets how I manage to layer them because I know that a lot of people struggle with it. Usually my advice is to practice and figure out which colors layer over others because each color has a slightly different hardness and texture. Also, using smooth paper makes a massive difference, and I definitely recommend Pith sketchbooks for that. That's what I'm using right here. They open completely flat too, which I love. To draw these plants, I'm looking to my right where my little shelf of plants is. It's where they're all huddled to pick up whatever little bits of sunlight we get, which in the UK is not a lot, especially in January. Another question I get asked a lot is what I'm holding. This is a KraftGeek pastel holder. It's super easy to use. You just press the end in and slide the pastel into it and it holds. Because I'm currently learning to tattoo while also healing from a climbing injury, I've been getting some arm pain, so this helps protect my hand a bit, as well as protecting my pastels from constantly snapping in half, which is a really terrible feeling. I get it from Cult Pens, where I also buy my pastels from individually so that I can pick and choose exactly what colours I'm currently missing. This is the most helpful way for me to keep the right colours in my collection without buying any art that I won't use. It's less wasteful in some ways, but probably more expensive in the long run, but it works for me. Particularly because I have a few pastels that I use all the time, which at the moment would be the flame red, cobalt blue, the yellow, the light blue, the light olive, and the black and white. The plants I'm drawing from here are my monstera, my snake plants, and my avocado plant. I'll show you them now. I went through a crazy plant phase a few years ago and these are the only ones that made it through. You can tell it was a little bit of a struggle. I used to live in a very dark flat and it's honestly a miracle that anything survived it. I added a light blue background here, but something felt a little bit off about it. I think it's just not enough tonal contrast, but I decided to just go for it for now and figure it out later. I've also added some deep blue to give it a bit more of a fun gradient and up the contrast a bit. Overall, it's a cute and fun drawing and I'm excited to start the final artwork. So this is one of 3 canvases I recently bought because so far I only have one on my shop, and although they don't sell very often, I just wanted to have a bit more to offer and to gain some more experience working on a canvas. When I posted the process for my other canvas artwork, I got some advice in the comments about how to use pastels on it more successfully. One piece of advice was to prep the canvas with a few layers of gesso, which I have done. I also wet the back and let it dry, as that's supposed to tighten it a bit so it has more give. I cut out a lot of the silly messes I made here, but I left one in. I think I was having a bad day for hand-eye coordination because it was starting to get annoying at this point. But it really didn't matter, and I was glad to be working with a forgiving medium where I can just paint over any blobs. I realized when I finished the rough artwork that I set myself a goal to get more used to paints, and then immediately went back to using my pastels without even thinking. So I promised myself I would use more paints in the final, using the pastels simply to add detail and texture. I was really nervous though, which might sound silly, but I'm so not confident with painting that it actually scares me a bit while I'm using it. You can see the difference between when I'm using the 2 mediums. I could barely get a good satisfying shot of me actually using my brush because I hesitated with every stroke. I think part of this is because I'm just using a brush that is a little bit too big in places, because I wanted a sort of choppiness and chunkiness of the flat brush, but it just didn't fit in the areas I wanted to use it in. I'm also super uncomfortable using mediums that are really flat and don't have much obvious texture. This is why I went with so many different shades and variations of the same blue. Even though I knew I would be using the pastels on top, I wanted to make it look a bit more interesting. My phone actually ran out of space here, so you'll just have to imagine me painting the plants in. I switched back to the Neocolors for the details here, which works surprisingly well. The pastels don't come out very saturated on canvas, so the paint ended up giving them such a good base to work on, and they're perfect for bringing out the texture of the fabric underneath. The blue I managed to mix could have been a bit more on the purple side. I don't know why, but I'm often a bit put off by the more green side of the blue spectrum. All my branding and color choices lean towards a cool blue. I'm just super drawn to it. But I think here, because the tiger's sitting in with these green plants, it works out okay. This stage of the drawing is crazy too because of how much of the orangey red and greeny blue are like fighting against each other. It really makes it exciting to look at because they're also quite close in tonal values, so they're like really fighting each other to be seen right now, which means I definitely want to come in with either a really light or really dark tone for the background, or it's just not going to be a balanced drawing. I also haven't mentioned yet, but please ignore the fact that you can see my phone stand in the shot here. It was the best I could figure out for now. The focus isn't right too for some of the video, which I'm really sorry about. I have only made a few long format videos and I'm still getting used to it, so please go easy on me. I hope it is in focus enough to not be really annoying to watch. Speaking of phone stands, I kind of want to just quickly mention that I was sent this by KraftGeek very kindly, and once it arrived I did realise that it doesn't bend downwards, and as an artist who films my art from above, that it was a bit of a problem, but I thought I'd give it a little bit of a review anyway. It's a good design, my phone snaps onto it really tightly, which is great. Yeah, I think if you're filming something like a TikTok maybe, or something like of yourself, where you're happy to film like pointing upwards at yourself, then I recommend it as quite a good budget phone stand. Thank you KraftGeek for sending that. And it really snaps closed. It's less clunky than the phone stand that I had already, and it's so much more like portable and efficient, and I can just snap my phone onto it. If this is something that you're looking for, I've been provided a code, PHOBE, PHOBE, for 15% off. Okay, so mixing the right green for the avocado plants was a bit of a challenge. I did study colour and composition at uni, so I have some experience with colour mixing, but that was a while ago and I've never really practiced it much, so it took me a while to make this colour. I wanted to get it really close to my olive pastel that I love to use for plants, but the green paint that came in this set was quite cool, so I tried adding yellow and white, but then it was too bright, and eventually I started adding orange, and this worked quite well to create a sort of dull yellowy green for those leaves. And then I used the brighter green that I'd already mixed for the new leaves, and this worked great. All I had to do was go with my pastels for detail, and I was ready to start working on the background. This is when I had the idea to go in with black, so I tested it out on the rough, took a deep breath, and decided to go with it. I tried using my pastels at first because I am a coward, and I quickly realized that I needed to get the paints out again, or I was just not going to have the saturated, contrasting shaping effect that I wanted. I was really worried that this would mess up all the work I put in so far, especially at this stage of an artwork. I'm tired and I can't see what I'm drawing as clearly anymore, so it feels like every decision is harder to make and I'm worried about regretting it. But looking back, I think it always made a lot of sense and that it really wasn't such a big deal. I took my time shaping out the drawing with black and filling in all the gaps without trying to make it look too perfect, as I still wanted that energy and texture to remain as much as possible. This has been an amazing experience, getting me started, being more brave with my art and trying new things. And it's just the beginning. I will be filming my other two canvases as well. And you'll know I really messed one up if you only end up seeing one of the other two. But yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. You can recommend what you'd like me to draw for those as well in the comments. I'd love to hear some ideas. And here's the completed painting. I'm super happy with it and it's definitely going on my shop as an original. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.